Alright, it is time to write your first program. I am going to explain to you what the program is, and then I am going to give you everything you need in order to make it. The goal is to create a program that will print the text, "Hello Reddit," to the screen. The programming language we are going to be using in order to do this is called C. Here are the rules for C that you need to know in order to make this program. Now, because we want to print text to the screen, we need a function that will do this. So we're going to use a function that comes packaged with C in a library that is known as the Standard Input-Output Library. Now, in order to use the functions in this library, you have to include the file stdio.h, which is short for Standard Input-Output, and you have to include that file at the top of your program. Remember that I told you that every programming language has a different way of including files. So in order for you to do this, I need to show you the specific syntax in C for including a file. So when you are using C, the way that you include a file is you first of all put a pound character, then you write the word include, then you put a less than sign, then you specify the exact file that you want to include, and then you put a greater than sign. So, for example, if you had a file called myfile.h and you wanted to include it, you would write pound sign, include, less than sign, myfile.h, greater than sign. So, going back to syntax for a minute, every programming language does this differently. Another programming language might not have the pound sign, or it might not have the less than and greater than sign. But in C, you need the pound sign, then the word include, then a space, then the less than sign, the file name, and then a greater than sign. Now, remember, the file that I told you that you needed to include is called stdio.h. So take a look at this. Here's the syntax you use. Pound sign include file name. This is an example where the file name is myfile.h, and this is the actual file that you need to include. Now, this file, stdio, that's short for Standard Input-Output, and the reason that you're going to be including this file specifically is because it contains the input-output functions, which include the functions that allow you to print text to the screen. So look at this page for a minute, and you should be able to see exactly what this line needs to look like in order to include the stdio.h file. Now what I want you to do is open up any text editor of your choice, Notepad, it doesn't matter, and at the very top of that file, I want you to put the include statement that is going to include stdio.h. So pause the video, do that, and then press play when you're ready to proceed. Okay, so that takes care of step one. Now, I mentioned that some programming languages require you to create a function in order to write a program. C is one such language. Therefore, you will have to create a function called main for your program to work correctly. C has specific rules for how you do this. So in order to create the main function in C, this is the syntax that we use. First, we write int. Now, int simply means integer, number. It specifies that the main function is going to have a return value, and that return value is going to be a number. In other words, when this program finishes, it is going to return a number to the operating system that called the program. So, in this case, the main function will return a number as an indicator of whether or not it was successful. Void, inside of the parentheses, just means that you are not sending any arguments to the function. In other words, the main function doesn't require any additional information to be sent to it in order to do its job. You will learn more about this later in the course. So what we do when we create a function in C is, first of all, we specify the return data type. In this case, we're saying that the function is going to return an int, which is short for integer. It's going to return a number. Then we put a space. Then we put the name of the function. Whenever you create a program in C, the name of your program is always going to be main. So this is your main function. It's basically the whole program. So after the name of the function, which in this case is main, you're going to put an opening parentheses. And then inside of the parentheses, you're going to put whatever the arguments are. In this case, there aren't any arguments. When there are no arguments, in C, you write void, which means there are no arguments. Then you put a close parentheses in order to specify that you have now fully enclosed any arguments inside of the parentheses. Now, for the main body of the program, or of the function, you put an opening brace, then all of your programming code goes here, and then you put a close brace when you're all done in order to end the program. So let's recap. In order to create the main function in the C programming language, you first of all say int, which means it's going to return a number once it's done running. Then you put the function name, which is going to be main. Then you put an opening parentheses. Then you write void, which means nothing. There are going to be no arguments for this function. And then you put a close parentheses, then an opening brace, then your programming code, then a closing brace. So here's what I want you to do. Go back to your text editor, whether it was Notepad or whatever it is, and at the very top you should have your include statement. Go ahead and hit enter at the end of that line, and hit enter a couple of times so that you're on a new blank line, and then write your main function exactly as you see here. Of course, leave this out. So you're just going to write int main void, the opening brace, and then the closing brace, and leave some room, some blank lines that you can write some programming code for the next step. So go ahead and pause the video and then write int main void and then the closing brace exactly as you see it here. Remember, every single character is important because that's part of the syntax of C. Make sure that you leave room to put more programming code. Make sure that these are blank lines. Don't actually write any code goes here. just make some blank lines, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so at this point, at the very top of your file, you should have the include statement that includes the file stdio.h. Underneath that, you should have the main function with empty lines in between the opening and closed brace, giving you room to write instructions. So remember that the goal of this program is going to be printing text to the screen. Specifically, we're going to print the text, "Hello, Reddit," but you can replace that with anything you want. So in order to do that, you need to know two things. First of all, you need to know the name of the function that we're going to use in order to do this. And second of all, you need to know the syntax that that function requires. So here's how this works. The function that we are going to use in order to print text to the screen is called printf. That's the name of the function. You call a function in C by simply putting the function name along with any arguments within parentheses. Remember that text must be enclosed within double quotes. So you may find during this course that I sometimes refer to the extra information you send to functions as parameters, and other times I refer to them as arguments. The correct terminology in the C programming language is argument. So what you need to do as your next step is open up your file where the include statement is on the top, and then you've created your main function and you've left room inside your main function. Inside of that area, the blank area, in between the opening and closed brace of your main function, you need to put a printf function that prints the text you want to print. So all you have to do is remember that the function name is printf, and the way you call a function in C is putting the function name followed by a parentheses, and then the argument or arguments, which in this case is just going to be a string of text enclosed within quotes. At the end of that, you're going to put a parentheses and then a semicolon at the very end. So try this on your own, pause the video, and then in a few seconds I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. If you get stuck, don't worry. Just try it on your own and then pause the video and come back in a few seconds. Okay, so if you were having any trouble, keep this in mind. Right now inside your text file you should already have this right here. If you don't, or if you're stuck, then go ahead and make sure that you put that into your text file. The very top of your text file should be your include statement, and then a line or two under that you should have int main void with an opening brace, and then you should have some blank lines and then a closed brace. So the question is, what goes inside here? So I gave you an example function and how you would call that function. Now, with an example function, you have the function name, then an opening parentheses, then a quote, then the text, a closed quote, parentheses, and a semicolon. So if we know the name of the function is printf, then all I'm going to do is replace example function with printf. And now the printf statement needs to go inside the body of our main function. Now, it does not matter if you have this at the very beginning of the line or you put a few spaces over to make it look nicer. The point is that you need to have your printf statement inside your main function. So once you've done that, then we're ready to go on to the next step. So go ahead and pause the video. Make sure that your main function looks like this, and then press play when you're ready to continue. There's only one more thing you need in order to write your first program. You need to know how to return control back to the operating system once the program finishes. The way you do that is with the return command in C. The way return works is you write the word return, then you put a space, and then you put what it is that you want to return. In this case, we're going to return a 0. And lastly, you put a semicolon at the end. You'll notice that in most lines of code in C, you put a semicolon at the end in order to indicate the end of that line of code. So the next question is, where does this go inside your program? The answer is, it goes at the very end of your main function, but before the final brace. So you're going to have your int main void with an opening brace. Then under that, you're going to have your printf statement with a semicolon at the end. And then underneath that, you're going to have your return statement with a semicolon at the end. And then underneath that, you're going to have your closing brace. And that's it. So go ahead and try this on your own with the instructions that I've given you, and pause the video, and when you're done, and when you think that you have correctly written your first program that is designed to print some text, and you can make the text whatever you want it to be, then go ahead and press play and we will continue. Okay, so here you are. This is how it should look. You should have your include statement at the top of the file, which is going to include the stdio.h file. Why are you including that file? Because that file contains the functions, including printf, that can do input and output. In this case, printf is obviously output. So if you don't include the stdio.h file, then printf effectively doesn't exist. Printf is inside this file. Next, you have to create your main function. You have to begin by writing int. Why do you write int? Because you're specifying the return value that the main function is going to have, and you're saying that that return value is going to be an integer, a number, 0 in this case. When you return 0, you have to return an integer because you're telling C that it's going to return an integer. So the 0 must be an integer, which it is. Then you're going to put the function name. Now, why is the function name main? It's main because you're saying this is your main program. It's not a sub-function within the program, it's the whole program. Your main program is always called main. Then you put an opening parentheses, and then void, and then a close parentheses. Why void? Because that means you're not sending any arguments to the program. And the opening and closing parentheses are just C's way of saying, put your arguments in here. Then you put an opening brace, which means now you're beginning the actual instructions in the function. Your first instruction is going to be printf hello with a semicolon. The function name is printf. The argument is a string of text that is hello. And then the semicolon at the end means you're done with that particular instruction. And then, now that you're done doing everything you want your program to do, you need to return a 0, and at that point you put a closing brace, which means that you're all done writing your program. So in the next lesson we're going to review this first program a little bit more, and congratulations on writing your first program.